Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with the very cool Brooklyn-based jazz journeyman pianist Kevin Hayes. He talks about his brand new 2016 album called North, and it's an ode to Harlem. So in New York City, Harlem is considered North. So this album focuses on elements of history, beauty, and hope, and it travels beyond jazz standards and incorporates his love of classical, blues, soul, folk, and rock music into his originals. Joined by his New Day Trio of Rob Jost on double bass and Greg Joseph on the drums, this is an album full of the brilliance Kevin always brings to his recordings. So please dig this overview of this album and interview, my friends.
So before we get into this new album, which is a wonderful listen, I want to ask you, there's so many levels of this album that is emotively driven, as if any album's not, but there seems to be a special sense about North. But the cover is very cool, and the story behind it, the fact that in Harlem and Sugar Hill, you peeled back layers of all these posters. Talk about the cover. It's really nice.
What happened is some workers peeled back this paneling behind the bus stop at 145th Street and Frederick Douglass, where I just actually moved from there, but I was living there for about 5 years now back in Brooklyn. But so I'm just sort of standing at the bus, and I turn around, bus stop, and I turn around, and I see all these posters. It's like, what is this? And they don't have dates on them, but we're sort of placing them somewhere in, I think, the early mid-'60s is my guess. Perhaps some of them are earlier than that. When you have ticket prices like $2, and I didn't. And the names weren't recognizable. Actually, I need to do a little more research on the names of some of the bands, like Somebody Williams. I don't think they were necessarily, super well-known bands. Perhaps at the time they were more well-known. We just forgot about them. But so it was really cool. So, and I noticed with each passing day that people had been pulling these billboards off, probably to save them themselves. And it was clear this, some kind of Harlem Heritage Society was not going to preserve this wall, with some plexiglass or something. So, and 7-Eleven was going in. So that was it. So it was a little window of opportunity to take some photos and to share that,
Wonderful. Before we get into how you feel about this album and the Afterglow, just take me into the studio when you were recording this. What's going on? What's the mood? How you feeling? What do you want to say with this album?
It wasn't that different than necessarily other times that I've recorded in terms of what did make it a little different was that we videoed the whole session. And if you check out, we're just starting to we put together a couple of tunes, and included in it is those are included in the kind of video EPK that we've released. You'll notice that the mood, that the lighting is quite moody. It's quite it's almost like silhouette type lighting. So the lighting was very low, or rather it was spotlighted, and then everything else around that, was low lighting. So it definitely created a bit of a mood in the studio with us doing that. So that was a new experience. But, in terms of the general energy of the studio, we made the record in one day. It was just one day in the studio. We had played quite a bit over these past few years, this New Day Trio. So generally, we'll just sort of get a feeling, get the sound set up, make sure everybody's comfortable with their headphone mix and that they can hear properly, everybody can see each other. We just start. And as I recall, we started with the tune Violetta, just trying to get, because it was the most, it was sort of the newest tune, and it was one that I wasn't sure would work, and, how are we going to do it, and do we do some open rubato things to start, or do we just go right into this kind of 5/4 groove? So Rob had brought his ukulele, which I had not expected. He just started plucking away. He said, man, I learned the changes, I got the melody, so let's try it. And I said, that sounds great. The song is for Violetta Zapata, wonderful singer, a Chilean singer, folk singer that passed too soon. But I just love her music and her voice. And so it was a dedication to her. And so, I don't know, somehow the ukulele kind of fit with that mood. So we started with that and then just moved through some of the other tunes, but there were several takes that we tried, and I generally mix things up mood-wise or tempos just to try different things as we go through a session. It's kind of how I like to play live. It's like from night to night I'll try different tempos, and that's generally what happened, but it went down pretty quick.
So let me ask you this. Why did you start the album with Birds Scrapple from the Apple? Why was that going to set the tone for this album?
I just liked the opening. I just kind of said, hey, Rob, why don't you play something up front? And he just started playing this great vamp. I mean, actually, originally, I'll tell you a little backstory on Scrapple from the Apple. The actual title, it's a quote-unquote derangement of Scrap from the Apple. So basically, the structure of it is that I take 2 bars of the original bebop melody that he wrote, and then I start transposing that melody up half steps every 2 measures, which is a little trick I've used in the past to have some fun. I've done it on Stella by Starlight. I recorded that a number of years ago. So the original title, after I messed his tune up thoroughly, was Unscrapulous. But then I was talking to my publishing guy, and he said, it's pretty close to Scrapple from the Apple, even though it's more like an arrangement, even though it's pretty unrecognizable at a certain point. So we just decided, okay, let's not tee off the Parker people, and, it's your tune. So I kind of I'll announce it as Unscrapulous. It's Unscrapulous on the music, but it's Scrapple from the Apple. So.
Right on. So the one thing, what really comes out at me after listening to this album and the description that you have of kind of the recording on your website, the elements of history, beauty, and hope wrapped into classical blues, soul, funk, and rock. How do you feel all of that came together? And do you feel that that's the way this album comes out?
It's hard for me to say. I mean, not to contradict my website, but, ultimately, you're trying to put the stuff into words. It's a bit of copy, Ultimately, you have to just sort of listen. I mean, for me, this is music these are different types of music or sources that I love, and that I've checked out over the years. So it's not something that I set out to say, well, I'm going to do something from this world and this world. And it's just music that I've checked out and loved over the years. So I don't remember the exact sequence. I don't have it in front of me, but, I don't know if the Lead Bellies butted up against the Schumann, but it's all, to me, it's all music, and what I'm trying to do, my music, is, I guess, just to be honest about what I feel about that music, and I guess ultimately it comes through my particular style of approach, and I'm heavily influenced by blues and, the jazz singers and, the folk singers, Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, singer-songwriters. I love classical music. I love counterpoint, Bach, Schumann, Scarlatti, and of course I love jazz, the jazz tradition. So I guess in some way I've always been a bit of, and I've been working within this I've been working this way for a while. So I guess this is sort of the next chapter in that, and I hope it's getting clearer, and better. Sure. So that's my goal, is to, but I don't have some grand scheme of all these things have to come together and I have to prove some kind of point. It's more just, hey, here's a beautiful melody that Schumann wrote.
Absolutely.
Do Camiso, and let's just see if this works.
Yeah.
Or here's this great Lead Belly thing, and it's, for me, the blues has to kind of be there throughout.
Right.
That feeling, it might be obscured a little bit by something that sounds a little bit more classical.
So you're joined by the new day trio, Rob Jost on double bass and Greg Joseph on drums. How long have you been playing with these guys, and how do you feel you communicated on this album?
We've played together now for, I think probably going on 5 years or so. I've known Greg the longest. We were actually roommates back in Brooklyn. My first stint in Brooklyn. I'm now in my second. In terms of how it went down in the studio, I just felt it went beautifully, and everyone felt just very present to the situation and prepared, not necessarily like they had everything figured out, because we're working things out, even though we've played a lot together as it goes, and the atmosphere is different. The energy was really nice and relaxed. It was just us and the engineer, and just very intimate and quiet. And they said, "Hey, let's try this. Let's try this." And of course, we had just one day, so I knew I had a lot of music to cover, and we kept things moving. We broke for lunch, don't starve the band. But we worked hard, and everybody just played beautifully and contributed their own special personalities to the music. So I'm really happy about how it came out.
So let me ask you this. One of the best artistic movements this country witnessed was the Harlem Renaissance. And I always hear from a lot of New York cats that they're in Brooklyn. Do you sense that there's a level of Brooklyn Renaissance going on in the world of jazz these days?
Possibly. I'm not sure it's specific to Brooklyn. There's a lot of musicians that live in Brooklyn. But there's also a lot of musicians, particularly younger generation, I've noticed, has moved a lot have moved to Harlem. A lot of it's economics too. You're talking about trying to find a place that you can afford too.
Yeah.
And of course, Brooklyn is now really up there. The rents have skyrocketed. And you can have a bombed out neighborhood, and they put it in the kitchen, and they'll charge you $3,000, for a one bedroom. It's a little ridiculous, But it used to be when I first moved to Brooklyn. I moved in the early '90s. When I first moved to Brooklyn, I moved in with the drummer Bill Stewart, and we were housemates for a little while. And he's been at his place out in Sunset Park, which is a bit south, for like 25 years at this point. And but there's a lot of musicians around. In the neighborhood I live in, I'm right around the corner from a great harmonica player, Gregoire Marais, played on my last record. Near Felder, a great guitarist, is just a block away. Lionel Lueke is up the road. So there's a lot of great musicians. So I don't know about Brooklyn Renaissance necessarily, but maybe there's more than just some cats living in the neighborhood to make a renaissance, but not sure.
Right on. Let me ask you this. What are you going to do to promote this album? Any plans on going out on the road? What are you going to do to get this going?
Yeah, well, we are planning. We've got some gigs lined up. We're doing a CD release show in New York on September 7th, and we've got some touring plans to go to Asia and some other work in the States and Europe. So got a gig in Canada next in a couple of weeks for a festival, and so the idea is just to put the music out there and hope people relate to it and enjoy it.
Perfect.
Hope to make it out to Kansas City too.
Man, I would love for you guys to make it out there. I'd love to see it live.
I think I'm going to be at the Blue Room a little bit of a ways out. I believe it's in November, the 11th of November. That's our goal. We're trying to book some other gigs around there. I'm also going to be in Lawrence, Kansas with Jimmy Green. We're doing some gigs out in the Midwest, in St. Louis. But it'd be great to see you out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. Yeah, Lawrence is a great music hub as well. So, well, cool. Hey, Kevin, good luck with the album. Thank you for taking a little time out for me today.
Thank you.
We'll see you in November. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and albums out there in jazz from New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world. And thanks to Kevin for all of that music and his stories in time. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store, or always visit the neonjazz.blogspot.com for all things Neon Jazz. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
Neon Jazz.